I still remember the moment I thought I had found the one. Megan made me feel loved, needed, like I finally mattered to someone. But there was something I failed to see back then. The line between caring and controlling existed only in her mind, and it was thinner than I ever imagined. One simple question at 3 a.m. changed everything. Sometimes walking away in silence becomes the loudest answer you can give. Before we begin, let me know where you are watching from today. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been called too caring, just for loving someone. This story is for you. Stay with me. I was 26 years old when I met Megan. I had been working at a graphic design company in Columbus, Ohio for about 3 years at that point. My life was routine. Wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. I was not unhappy, but I was not exactly fulfilled either. I had dated a few women before. Nothing serious, nothing that made me think about a future with someone. Then she walked into my life. There was this coffee shop about 2 blocks from my office. I went there almost every morning before work. One Tuesday in March, I noticed a new face behind the counter. She had dark brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and when she smiled at me to take my order, something shifted inside my chest. Her name tag said Megan. We made small talk that first day. She told me she was working part-time while finishing her master's degree in communications. I told her I designed logos and marketing materials for a living. She laughed and said that sounded way more interesting than writing academic papers. I disagreed, but I liked the way her eyes lit up when she laughed. For the next few weeks, I found myself going to that coffee shop more than I needed to. One morning, she handed me my usual order, and there was a phone number written on the side of the cup with a little smiley face. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. We started texting that same day. Our first date was that Friday. By the end of the month, we were officially together. Those first 6 months were everything I had ever wanted in a relationship. Megan was attentive, affectionate, and made me feel like I was the center of her world. She would send me good morning texts before I even woke up. She remembered the little things I mentioned in passing and surprised me with thoughtful gestures. When I introduced her to my family during Thanksgiving, my mother pulled me aside and told me she had never seen me so happy. She was right. By the 5th month, we decided to move in together. We found a small apartment about 15 minutes from both our workplaces. It was not fancy, but it was ours. I remember thinking this was it. This was the woman I was going to spend my life with. But somewhere around the 7th month, things started to shift. It was subtle at first. Megan began going out with her friends more often. I had no problem with that. Everyone needs their own social life. But she started coming home later and later without letting me know. One night, around 11 p.m., I sent her a simple text message. Just 5 words. "Where are you right now?" Her response caught me off guard. She wrote back saying I did not need to check on her 24/7. I stared at my phone for a long time, confused. I had only asked once. I was not trying to control her. I was just wondering if she was okay. I convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe she had a stressful day. Maybe I was being too sensitive. I apologized and let it go, but it kept happening. Every time I showed any concern about her whereabouts or her plans, she would get defensive. She started using a word that would come to define our relationship in its final months. Clingy. She called me clingy when I asked if she wanted to have dinner together. She called me clingy when I suggested we spend the weekend at home. She called me clingy when I expressed that I missed her after she had been out 3 nights in a row. I started second-guessing myself constantly. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I needed to give her more space. So I tried. I stopped asking where she was going. I stopped suggesting plans. I stopped reaching out first. Then came my birthday. I had been looking forward to it for weeks. Not because I needed a big celebration, but because I wanted to spend it with her. I told her about it casually a few times leading up to the day. I made a reservation at a nice Italian restaurant one she had mentioned wanting to try months earlier. I even bought a new shirt for the occasion. That evening, I waited and waited. She did not come home. Around 9 p.m., I called her. No answer. I sent a text. No response. Finally, close to midnight, she walked through the door. I could smell the alcohol on her breath before she even got close to me. She had gone out for drinks with her coworkers. She had completely forgotten. When I told her I was disappointed, she turned it around on me. She asked if I expected her whole life to revolve around me. She said I was suffocating her with my expectations. I did not argue. I just quietly cleaned up the dinner I had prepared and put the uneaten food in the refrigerator. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding. Should loving someone make you feel guilty for caring about them? The months that followed were some of the loneliest of my life, and I was living with someone I supposedly loved. I stopped being myself. I became a shadow of the man I used to be, always walking on eggshells, always afraid that anything I said or did would trigger another accusation of being too clingy. I stopped asking Megan where she was going. I stopped calling her when she was out late. I stopped expressing any needs of my own because every time I did, it became evidence of my supposed obsession with controlling her. But here is the thing that really messed with my head. When I stopped reaching out, she complained about that too. She would come home and ask me why I did not text her during the day. She would accuse me of not caring anymore. I could not win. If I showed concern, I was clingy. If I gave her space, I was distant and cold. I felt like I was losing my mind. My work started to suffer. I could not focus on projects. I missed deadlines for the first time in my career. My manager called me into his office one afternoon and asked if everything was okay at home. I lied and said I was just tired. He did not look convinced, but he let it go. Meanwhile, Megan was becoming more and more distant. She would sit on the couch, scrolling through her phone, but the moment I walked into the room, she would angle the screen away from me. When I asked about it once, just once, she exploded. She asked if I was going to start monitoring her phone now, too. She called me paranoid and controlling. I found a receipt in her coat pocket one evening while I was doing laundry. It was from a steakhouse downtown. The total was over $150. Dinner for two. She had told me she was working late that night. I never mentioned it. I was too afraid of being called crazy again. My younger sister called me one Sunday afternoon. She said I sounded different on the phone. Exhausted, hollow. She asked me directly if things with Megan were okay. I gave her the same answer I gave everyone. I was fine, just tired from work. Kyle, a co-worker who sat in the cubicle next to mine, started noticing things too. He asked me one day if I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. He meant it as a joke, but there was genuine concern in his eyes. I brushed it off and changed the subject. I stopped calling my parents as often. I made excuses to skip family gatherings. I pulled away from everyone who cared about me because I did not want them to see what I was becoming. I did not want to admit that the relationship I had invested everything into was slowly destroying me from the inside. About 2 weeks before everything came crashing down, I saw something that I could not ignore. Megan had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she took a shower. A notification popped up on the screen. It was a text message from someone named Brad. The preview showed just a few words, but they were enough. It said, "Miss you, babe," with a heart emoji. When she came out of the bathroom, I asked her about it. I tried to keep my voice calm. I just wanted an explanation. She went ballistic. She accused me of going through her phone. She called me sick and obsessive. She said I had serious trust issues and that I needed professional help. She turned it around so completely that by the end of the argument I was the one apologizing. I was the one promising to do better. I was the one feeling like I had done something wrong. But something inside me cracked that night. I stopped sleeping properly. I would lie awake for hours, replaying every conversation, every accusation, every moment where she made me feel like the villain for simply caring. I started questioning my own memories. Was I really as clingy as she said? Was I imagining things? Then I thought back to my previous relationships. None of those women had ever called me clingy. None of them had ever made me feel guilty for asking how their day was or wanting to spend time together. Something was not adding up. A small voice in the back of my mind started whispering what I had been too afraid to acknowledge. Maybe the problem was not me. Maybe it never was. It happened on a Thursday night. Or maybe I should say Friday morning because it was just after 3 a.m. I woke up, suddenly the way you do when something feels wrong even before you are fully conscious. I reached over to Megan's side of the bed. It was empty. The sheets were cold, which meant she had been gone for a while. I checked my phone. No messages, no missed calls. I tried calling her. It went straight to voicemail. I waited, telling myself not to panic, not to be clingy. Around 3:30, I heard the front door open. I walked out to the living room. Megan was standing there, her hair disheveled, her makeup smeared, the smell of whiskey clinging to her clothes. She looked at me with irritation like I had done something wrong by being awake. I asked her one simple question. I kept my voice calm and steady. I just asked where she had been. That was when she lost it. She started screaming at me. Her voice echoed through the apartment so loudly, I am sure the neighbors could hear every word. She yelled that I was too clingy. She yelled that I could not let her live her own life. She said I was suffocating her, that she felt trapped, that being with me was like being in a prison. And then she said the words that cut the deepest. She told me she regretted ever choosing me. She called me boring and obsessive. She said she wished she had never moved in with me. I stood there in silence, letting every word wash over me. In the past, I would have apologized. I would have begged her to calm down. I would have promised to change, to give her more space, to be less of whatever she accused me of being. But something was different that night. As she kept yelling, I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was like all the noise suddenly faded into the background, and I could finally hear my own thoughts clearly. I looked at her, this woman I had loved with everything I had, and I realized I did not recognize her anymore. Or maybe I was finally seeing her clearly for the first time. When she paused to catch her breath, I spoke. Just one word, okay? She stopped mid-sentence. Her face twisted in confusion. She was not used to this. She was used to me arguing back, defending myself, apologizing, begging. But I was done. She muttered something about me being impossible to talk to and stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I did not follow her. I sat down on the couch in the dark living room and stayed there until the first light of dawn started creeping through the windows. My mind was surprisingly clear. I knew exactly what I needed to do. When I was sure Megan was deeply asleep, I started packing. I moved quietly, taking only what belonged to me. Clothes, my laptop, a few books that had sentimental value, the framed photos of my family. I left everything we had bought together. I left the furniture, the kitchen appliances, all of it. I did not want anything that would remind me of this apartment or this relationship. I counted out enough cash to cover 2 months of rent and left it on the kitchen table. No note, no explanation, nothing. By 6 a.m., my car was packed. I took one last look at the apartment door, then turned and walked to the parking lot. I did not look back. I drove for 12 hours straight, stopping only for gas and coffee. My destination was Denver, Colorado. My Aunt Patricia lived there. She was my father's older sister, a widow who had been living alone since her husband passed away 5 years earlier. When I called her from a rest stop somewhere in Nebraska, she did not ask any questions. She just said the guest room was ready whenever I got there. That first week in Denver, I barely spoke. I slept most of the day and stared at the mountains in the distance the rest of the time. Aunt Patricia gave me space, but she made sure I ate and checked on me gently every evening. She never pushed me to talk about what happened. She just let me exist. I blocked Megan's number. I deleted all my social media accounts. I wanted to disappear completely, and I did. The first year was about survival. I found a job at a small design agency about a month after arriving. The pay was less than what I made in Ohio, but I did not care. I just needed something to occupy my mind. That was where I met Derek. He was a few years younger than me, loud and optimistic in a way that sometimes annoyed me at first. But he was persistent, and eventually we became close friends. I started seeing a therapist twice a month. It was hard at first, unpacking everything that had happened, examining the ways I had lost myself in that relationship. But slowly, I started to understand something important. I was not clingy, I was not obsessive. I was a man who loved deeply and gave that love to someone who used it against me. The second year was about rebuilding. I got promoted at work and started leading a small team of designers. I moved out of Aunt Patricia's house and rented my own apartment. It was small, but it was mine. I started running every morning before work. 5 miles at first, then 8, then 10. The physical exhaustion helped quiet the noise in my head. I reconnected with my family. I called my sister every Sunday. I visited my parents for Christmas for the first time in years. My mother cried when she saw me. She said I looked like myself again. The third year was about living. Derek and I decided to start our own design studio. We saved up, wrote a business plan, and launched it in the spring. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Within 6 months, we had enough clients to hire 2 more designers. And then there was Sophie. Derek introduced us at a barbecue at his place. She was a friend of his girlfriend, a nurse who worked at a hospital downtown. She was kind and funny and completely different from Megan. When I told her I was worried about texting her too much, she laughed and said she loved hearing from me. She never made me feel like my care was a burden. For the first time in years, I felt safe enough to love again. Then, 3 years and 2 months after I left Ohio, Megan found me. I was at the studio when I got the email. It came from an address I did not recognize, but as soon as I read the first line, I knew who it was. She wrote that she knew I was in Denver. She said she needed to see me. She was begging for a chance to explain. I found out later that Kyle, my old coworker, had run into her somewhere and mentioned he had heard I was doing well in Colorado. He did not know the full story. He was just making conversation. But that was all Megan needed. I thought about ignoring the email. I thought about blocking the address and pretending I never saw it. But after a few days, I realized that I needed this. Not for her, for me. I needed to close this chapter completely. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near downtown. Neutral territory. She was already there when I arrived. She looked different. Thinner. Tired. The confidence that used to radiate from her was gone. She looked like someone who had been running on empty for a long time. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. She started talking before I even sat down. She told me she was sorry. She told me Brad had been a mistake, that he had left her after just a few months. She told me her career had stalled, that she had moved twice in 3 years, that nothing had gone right since I left. Then she said the words I once would have given anything to hear. She said I was the best thing that ever happened to her. She asked for a second chance. She promised she had changed. I sat there and listened. I let her finish without interrupting, and when she was done, I took a deep breath. I told her I did not hate her. I meant it. The anger I once felt had faded a long time ago. But I also told her I did not love her anymore. I explained that 3 years ago she called me Clingy because I cared about her. She made me feel like something was wrong with me for loving her. Now I understood that I was never the problem. I told her I hoped she found peace. I genuinely meant that too. But I also told her that my future did not include her. It could not. I stood up and left enough cash on the table to cover both our drinks. As I walked toward the door, I heard her call my name. I did not turn around. Just like that morning 3 years earlier, I walked away without looking back. When I got in my car after that meeting, I expected to feel something heavy. Sadness, maybe, or anger, or even guilt. But instead, I felt light. Lighter than I had felt in years. It was like I had been carrying a weight I did not even know was there, and suddenly it was gone. I called Sophie on my way home. I told her about the meeting, about everything that was said. She listened without judgment the way she always did. When I finished, she simply said she was proud of me. Those 4 words meant more than she probably realized. That evening, Derek insisted on taking me out for a drink. He called it a celebration. Closing a chapter, he said. Moving on. We sat at a bar near the studio nursing beers and talking about nothing in particular. At one point, he clapped me on the shoulder and said something that stuck with me. He said the version of me he met 3 years ago was barely surviving. The version sitting next to him now was thriving. In the weeks that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The relationship with Megan. The years I spent in Denver rebuilding myself. The person I had become. I wrote a letter one night. Not to Megan, to myself. To the version of me that walked out of that apartment at 6 a.m. 3 years earlier, with nothing but a few boxes and a broken heart. I thanked him for being brave enough to leave. I thanked him for choosing himself when no one else would. My relationship with Sophie continued to grow. She was patient with me in ways I did not always deserve. She understood that I came with baggage, and she never made me feel ashamed of it. For the first time in my life, I understood what a healthy relationship was supposed to feel like. It was not about keeping score or walking on eggshells. It was about 2 people choosing each other every day, even when it was hard. Aunt Patricia visited the studio a few months later. She walked around looking at the work on the walls, and when she turned to me, there were tears in her eyes. She said she could see the light in my eyes again. She said it was the same light I had as a kid before life got complicated. That might have been the greatest compliment anyone has ever given me. Looking back now, I understand a few things I wish I had known earlier. Caring about someone is not a flaw. Wanting to know if the person you love is safe is not obsessive. Asking a simple question at 3 a.m. does not make you clingy. When someone makes you feel guilty for loving them, the problem is not your love. The problem is their inability to receive it. Walking away from Megan was the hardest thing I have ever done. But it was also the best decision I ever made. It was not giving up. It was choosing myself. It was recognizing that I deserved better than someone who used my affection as a weapon against me. I used to think that love meant sacrificing everything, including your own sense of self. Now I know that is not love. That is erasure. Real love does not ask you to disappear. It helps you become more of who you are. There is a question I want to leave you with. If you are in a relationship right now where you constantly question whether you are too much, where you apologize for caring, where you feel smaller every day instead of bigger, ask yourself this: are you in love, or are you losing yourself? Sometimes the answer is hard to hear, but it is always worth knowing. I am sitting on my balcony as I finish telling you this story. Sophie is inside making dinner. The sun is setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I feel at peace in a way I never thought possible. Megan called me Clingy for asking where she was, so I vanished for 3 years. And in those 3 years I found something I did not even know I had lost: myself. If this story resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been in a relationship where you were made to feel guilty for caring? Drop a comment below and share your experience. You are not alone. If this video helped you in any way, please hit the like button. It really helps this channel grow. And if you have not already, subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next story. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it today. Sometimes a story can be the push someone needs to choose themselves. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, loving yourself is not selfish. It is the foundation of every good thing that comes after. Take care of yourself. I will see you in the next one.